Peter Creed traded a city for a beauty, a grand gesture that sparked a romantic tale. Alas, I was neither the beauty nor Peter Creed, and had never met him. My husband was just a city guard, and he died in that war for refusing to surrender, ultimately holding the city. The next year, Peter Creed used a city to exchange for a beauty, and I became a foot washing maid by her side. While washing Queen Scarlet's feet, I happened to witness her throwing a massive tantrum, the target of her rage clearly Phoenix Palace. She wasn't even trying to lower her voice, simply because the Queen's birthday prompted the Emperor to sit with her for an hour. What a little slut! I underestimated you. Are you all ganging up on me because I'm a foreigner? You strut around with your bit of status, thinking I wouldn't dare to deal with you? I'll skin you alive. She roared at the head maid kneeling on the ground. Even in her fury, her delicate face remained beautiful. The head maid sat still as a quail, not daring to speak. Everyone knew she was scolding one thing while meaning another, but no one dared to say a word. After all, this beauty was worth a city to the emperor. Since entering the royal palace, all 3,000 concubines had become mere decorations, as she alone enjoyed all the emperor's favor. If the queen weren't Queen Mother's niece and a childhood sweetheart of the emperor, she probably wouldn't have even held his attention for that 1 hour. I kept my head down, carefully wiping her pearly white feet with the cloth, meticulously tending to every inch. The beauty continued to vent, as if weary of the silence brought about by everyone's fear to contradict her. In a fit of anger, she kicked me in the chest. Her other foot landed in the basin, splashing foot washing water onto my face. The warmth and the pain in my chest made me gasp, but I managed to suppress any sound. Queen Scarlet glanced down at me and sneered, using the back of her foot to lift my chin, forcing me to meet her gaze. What? Now you dare to resent me? I raised my head, but kept my eyes lowered, carefully wiping the jade foot at my chin with the brocade handkerchief, saying softly, "This servant wouldn't dare." "This servant is only worried. Did your ladyship hurt her foot just now?" She paused, then scoffed, "A foot washing maid is just a foot washing maid, only fit to wash my feet." I replied smoothly, "This servant is a servant, but a servant who serves your ladyship, still more noble than the servants of other palaces. Being able to wash your ladyship's feet is a blessing the servant has cultivated for 8 lifetimes." My words surprised her, but also softened her expression slightly. "Consider yourself to have some sense." She didn't say more, because a low, masculine voice came from behind her, "Scarlet." My hand paused in its task of wiping her foot. Fortunately, the queen consort was delighted and didn't notice this oddity. Barefoot, she ran toward the man not far away, her voice soft and melodious, like a feather lightly brushing against the heart, making one yearn. "Emperor, why are you here? Weren't you going to accompany the queen in Phoenix Palace? I thought you had forgotten." Scarlet. As she spoke, a crystal tear trickled down her cheek. A beauty shedding tears, like pear blossoms in the rain, who wouldn't feel heartache? Peter Creed was the same, even more so. He offered up a city for that single tear. Nonsense, I only treat Mia as a sister. It just so happened that Queen Mother was there today, so I stayed a little longer. How could I forget Scarlet? Really? The queen consort was coquettish. Peter Creed's eyes were full of tenderness as he held the beauty in his arms, desire welling up in his gaze. He suddenly noticed her bare feet and asked, "Why aren't you wearing shoes? Wasn't it because your concubine wanted to see your majesty as soon as possible? Does your majesty blame your concubine? Ha ha ha, how could it be your fault? Anyone in this world can be wrong, but Scarlet can never be wrong." Peter Creed laughed loudly, carrying the beauty toward the bed, his voice drifting back. "The foot washing maid, sentence her to kneel outside for an hour." I couldn't hear the rest, because I had already stepped outside. The winter in the royal city was bone-chilling, and the foot-washing water on my face seemed to freeze instantly, making my face feel frozen as well. "Go kneel, you lowly thing. Did you really think Queen Consort was so easy to please? Tooey." The head maid was in a foul mood, so she kicked me in the knees, sending me crashing heavily onto the snowy ground, surrounded by muffled jeers. Of course, the laughter and merriment inside the palace were even louder. I knelt there quietly, listening. Perhaps the laughter was too grating, or perhaps this winter was too cold, causing me to hallucinate and see that soldier in armor walking toward me, tenderly warming my hands. Why aren't you inside? It's so cold here, Celeste Sue, let's go inside. My eyes grew moist as I looked at his lowered eyebrows, his face tanned from the sun, yet still breaking into a silly grin. Celeste Sue, we won another battle. I killed 5 enemies, one of whom was a minor leader. The general specifically asked for my name as he passed by. Celeste Sue, the borderlands are too cold, and I figured the capital city must be cold too. So I saved all the military pay I received. Take it, and buy more winter clothes, don't get cold. Celeste Sue, this time I killed 15 enemies. The general said if I keep up the good work, he'll promote me to centurion. That way, the military pay I receive will be even more, enough to buy you a silver hairpin, much prettier than the peach blossom hairpin I carved. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You only think about me, you don't even think about buying winter clothes for yourself. How could I? Celeste Sue is my wife. Of course the money I earn should be spent. Tea on my wife. It's not much, but I'll work even harder. One day, I'll make Celeste Sue a general's wife. I couldn't be. Because the next year, he died in that city. That final family letter, stained with blood, was scrawled with these words: Celeste Sue, my wife, I'm sorry, but I am a soldier of great dynasty, people of great dynasty, and I will never surrender. I cried until I was hoarse, vomiting blood. In the end, I packed my backpack, wanting to see the city he was willing to die to defend, but I heard the boatman sigh, I'm afraid you can't go. That place is now foreign land. Our emperor, for that celestial beauty, gave it away to another country without a second thought. The borderlands were chaotic. I saw a girl who had died on the road while fleeing, dug a grave for her, used her name, and entered the royal palace. What I hid from the head housekeeper's inspection was that silver hairpin I had handed over. Snowflakes fluttered. After a night of pampering, the emperor also left in a hurry due to pressing official duties, brushing past me without a glance. I couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed. When I woke up, the old woman who shared a room with me sighed, "You've been blessed in disguise." In this small room, I was the foot washing maid, and she was the night soil collector, always taking care of me. But now, I was afraid she would be living alone. Queen Consort said, "Once you wake up, go serve by her side." It was called serving, but it was nothing more than following behind her, separated by several trusted maids, doing odd jobs. Queen Consort forgot things easily. How would she remember a small foot washing maid? However, those maids, seeing that I came from a foot washing maid background, never failed to make things difficult for me. To this, I always smiled and remained silent, never resisting. Over time, they found it boring, so they secretly dumped their work on me. However, if all 3,000 favors are focused on one person, so all 3,000 grudges. Queen Consort, who had seized the emperor's favor, was arrogant and domineering. Peter Creed not only didn't get angry, but praised her for being forthright and genuine. And those concubines who had previously been intimate with Peter Creed suffered in silence. One by one, whether accidentally or intentionally, their families either declined, or they were thrown into the cold palace for offending the queen consort. The queen was still young and naive, unable to manage things. The queen mother met with the emperor several times, but each time she returned disappointed. A shadow hung over the concubines. Finally, one day in the imperial garden, in front of the winter pond, Consort Joy, who had been neglected for half a year, rushed over and pushed Queen Scarlet into the pond. She laughed maniacally, "Scarlet Sue, you witch! Just because I contradicted you once, my entire family was executed on trumped-up charges. You deserve to die. Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me." Ha 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 ha. The scene was chaotic. The maids screamed for help, but they didn't dare let the eunuchs come forward and touch the queen consort's precious body. Seeing that the beautiful woman was about to meet an untimely end, I jumped into the freezing pond without hesitation. The heavy palace robes grew heavier in the pond. A drowning person, when they find a savior, clings to them tightly. By the time I pushed the queen consort ashore, everyone had crowded around her. No one pulled me up. But I couldn't die. My plan had just begun. I clung tightly to a stone, climbing up inch by inch. Consort Joy, who was being restrained, glared at me hatefully. You saved her, you're aiding a tyrant. You'll die a terrible death. You should go to hell with her. I smiled faintly. I would indeed die a terrible death. But Consort Joy, was your entire family really executed just because of a queen consort? Why, even when you were willing to throw away your life, didn't you dare to drag the real enemy down with you? This accident caused Peter Creed to fly into a rage. The Emperor's wrath caused rivers of blood to flow. The culprit, Consort Joy, was executed by slicing. The queen consort's trusted maids were all given a rope and hanged in the office of Prudence's prison. As for me, I was hurriedly changed into clean clothes and knelt, trembling, before the queen consort's bed. The emperor sat by the bedside, comforting the beauty, his voice calm but imposing. So, you saved Scarlet? My voice was neither loud nor soft, it was this servant. What's your name? I swallowed Celeste Sue and said, Fiona. This servant is Fiona Choi. He didn't object, but simply said, from now on, you will stay by Scarlet's side and be responsible for her safety. If anything happens to her, I will hold you accountable. I kowtowed deeply on the ground, my head hitting the ground with a crisp sound. This servant, thanks your majesty for your great kindness. Queen consort woke up and heard this. She didn't speak for a long time, but just told me to raise my head. She looked at my face closely and asked, did his majesty ask you your name? His majesty asked this servant her name only to remember this servant's life. If something happens to your ladyship in the future, this servant's family will be held accountable. She then smiled, leisurely touching her face. I thought so. It's just that you're a little prettier. His majesty already has this peony, and all those warblers and swallows in the harem. Why would he fancy a pale white flower? I was apprehensive. This servant wouldn't dare. You wouldn't dare. Life seemed to return to the past. Peter Creed was still inseparable from the queen consort, and I was still outside the palace. But this time I wasn't kneeling, but standing, quietly listening to the sounds inside, fearing that I wouldn't hear any of my mistress's orders. When the palace door opened, I lowered my head, not daring to look at the person walking out. Peter Creed left in a hurry again, but this time it wasn't due to official duties, but because Phoenix Palace had caught fire, and the maids inside were at a loss, coming to report. This troubled the people in the queen consort's palace. Her beloved had suddenly left, and the beauty smashed everything in the room in anger. In the end, she even claimed to be ill and declined Peter Creed's invitations several times. I picked up a piece of the broken porcelain vase. Because I never lost my temper with those below me, the cleaning maids dared to say a few more words to me, and I heard that this porcelain was a piece accidentally made in the official kiln, unique and priceless. It's a pity, but if you take it back and find a good craftsman, you can definitely fix it. I smiled faintly, stroking the crack. Yes, it can definitely be fixed. But no matter how well it is repaired, the crack will still be there, won't it? She looked at me in a daze, and said softly, Aunt's smile is really beautiful. I didn't usually feel that way. She called me Aunt, but in reality, I wasn't much older than her. After all, I was just a newlywed woman who had lost her husband after only a year of marriage. I didn't reply to her, but ordered the cleaning people to leave, gently closing the door to avoid disturbing the queen consort's rest. Goosefeather snow was falling from the sky again, and the winter roses in the courtyard were blooming brightly. I was used to standing outside the palace, guarding it day after day. The maids were afraid that something would happen to me, that I would get sick and no one would be the first to face the queen consort's anger, so they added a cloak for me. Following my gaze, they asked curiously, does Aunt like winter rose? I chuckled, no, I like peach blossom. Winter is too cold. I don't like things that bloom in winter either. But the queen consort liked them. The queen consort loved the red under the snow. In winter, sitting in the warm palace, and being able to see them when she looked up. She didn't know that in such heavy snow, those soldiers in the borderlands, in their thin cloth, couldn't bear it. The maid didn't reply, but suddenly knelt on the ground. I subconsciously turned around and saw the emperor in a bright yellow robe looking at me. I paused, lowered my eyes, and followed suit, kneeling down. The armor made of brocade and the bright yellow hem were right in front of my eyes. Peter Creed asked, "What's your name?" I replied, "Fiona." "This servant is Fiona Choi." This time, I knew he had remembered my name. "What's going on outside? What's all the noise about?" The queen consort was a light sleeper, and even the slightest noise could wake her up. Now she was already throwing a tantrum. I wanted to speak, but I didn't dare to get up. Instead, the person in front of me pushed open the door, his voice full of laughter. "Scarlet." A term of endearment was enough to soften the beauty's bones, filling the room with fragrance. I slowly stood up and calmly ordered the people below to prepare hot water. With my current status, this shouldn't have been my job in the first place, but the maid who carried the hot water in walked out again with difficulty, looking at me hesitantly. "Aunt, the queen consort said she wants you to deliver it in person." I was slightly stunned, took the hot water, and walked toward the palace. The palace was warm, dissipating some of the chill from my body. The whispers in my ear grew clearer, unusually explicit. That's right, the queen consort, as a foreign land person, always acted more boldly than the women of great dynasty. I thought, obediently not raising my head, unperturbed by the noises that were enough to make one blush. The queen consort also ignored me, as if calling me in was just a whim. So I did my own thing, and was about to leave when I suddenly heard a crash. Subconsciously, I looked over and saw that the queen's consort had fallen asleep at some point. The emperor's eyes were clear, and he happened to meet my gaze. My expression remained unchanged. I gave a bow and silently retreated, as if I had never been there. After one night, those rumors of the queen consort losing favor disappeared completely. Countless rewards were carried in, box after box. The emperor never went to the queen's place again. Once his official duties were over, he would only stay in the queen consort's palace. It was just that the queen consort loved to call me in when Peter Creed came. Peter Creed recited poetry with her, and I stood by the window, blocking the cold wind and grinding ink carefully, simply because the queen consort didn't like being stuffy but was also afraid of the cold. Peter Creed drank with her, and I stood beside her, washing my hands in cold water before carefully picking out the fish bones for her, one by one. The fish bones were sharp, and my hands inevitably trembled in the cold, stabbing my fingertips. The bright red blood beads were exceptionally beautiful in the winter. I seemed not to notice, and when everything was over, my hands were covered in blood. The queen consort was bored. "Forget it, reward you with it." She hadn't originally intended to eat it. I thanked her gratefully, but after wrapping my fingers, I carried the hot water in. Yes, even though I had become the head maid, I still served the queen consort by washing her feet, kneeling on the ground, and lowering my head. That never changed. And Peter Creed, from beginning to end, watched all of this. When I walked out of the palace door after it was over, the maids below were flattering, crowding around me. "Aunt, the queen consort rewarded us with food again. There's squirrel mandarin fish, which Aunt loves to eat the most. Aunt is the one who pleases the queen consort the most in our palace. There's squirrel mandarin fish every time." I smiled and looked at their young and tender faces, saying, "You can eat at it, no need to leave any for me." "Why? Doesn't Aunt love to eat this fish the most?" No, it wasn't me who loved to eat it was Peter Creed who loved to eat it. The queen consort remembered this, so there was this fish every time. In the beginning, the fish was eaten a bit more, but as the days passed, the fish became more and more intact. I looked at the winter rose that had fallen to the ground, smiling. Perhaps I'm tired of eating it. The end of the year was approaching, and the war at the border pass was urgent. Peter Creed hadn't stayed in the queen consort's place for several days, but had been in the imperial study. I also had a few days of leisure, going to the plum grove to pick some plum blossoms, preparing to put them in the queen consort's jade vase, so that when the queen consort woke up, she could see them at a glance, and be in a good mood, so she wouldn't splash the foot washing water on me again. The weather was getting colder, and I really didn't want to catch a cold. But I didn't know that Peter Creed would be there. Even though the queen consort's palace was not far away, he stopped and stayed in the plum grove. Before, as soon as his official duties were over, he couldn't wait to rush into the palace and be with the beauty. I hurriedly knelt down. From above, the emperor's deep voice came, word by word, as if he were savoring, Fiona Choi. This servant is here. Raise your head. I raised my eyes. The emperor was in his prime, dignified and handsome, with a face that was born to be amorous. He also looked closely at my face, suddenly saying, "The peach blossoms in Azure Cloud Palace bloom the best. That place is still empty. Would you like to go?" The queen consort doesn't like peach blossom. He continued, "I mean, you go alone." I thanked him. "Palace maids are transferred, this servant will obey the holy decree, and thank your majesty for your great kindness." He looked at me again. "You know I don't mean that." Within Great Dynasty, he was the supreme ruler. The imperial kitchen had more than 3,000 dishes. Even if he loved to eat one dish of squirrel mandarin fish, he couldn't only eat that dish forever, there had to be side dishes. It was just that he had made a promise of one love for life when his feelings were strong, and it was not good to slap himself in the face, so he was waiting for others to break it. It was as if he had been quietly watching me suffer humiliation, but had not spoken, waiting for me to be unable to bear it and prostrate myself at his feet, begging him for his love. But I just looked up at him, because he didn't let me lower my head, saying bluntly, "Your Majesty, please forgive me, this servant doesn't know." He laughed. A laugh of anger. "Fiona Choi, when will your face have any other expression?" Finally, a look of bewilderment and confusion appeared on my face. The emperor paused, and walked away, waving his sleeve. The snow deepened, quickly dissipating the heat from this place. Today's events were like a dream. Since then, even when Peter Creed came to the queen consort's place, he never gave me a glance. Days passed like flowing water, and the New Year's Eve banquet was held in the royal palace. I came with the queen consort, and finally saw the rumored queen. She looked to be about 16 or 17 years old, her eyes bright, and her appearance beautiful, but her face was mostly lifeless. Wearing thick palace robes, she didn't lose out to the queen consort in terms of aura. That's right, no matter how young she was a carefully raised legitimate daughter from a noble family. How could she lose to a foreign land woman? But it wasn't my fault that I had only seen her now, it was because since the queen consort entered the palace, Peter Creed had exempted her from the rule of having to greet the queen every day. And the queen? The queen hadn't taken a few steps out of her own palace, going to the queen mother's place every day, or staying in her own palace, fearing that someone would remember her. Her presence was completely non-existent. Of course, there were also the wives of various ministers who came to the New Year's Eve banquet. As I passed by, I heard a lot of laughter. "It's pitiful, she actually became a widow like this. The child is only 16, and is the only son. The emperor is forgiving, hasn't he already bestowed a title?" There was no way to avoid dying in battle. The woman at the center of the conversation had half-white hair, and the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes were probably impossible to hide with thick makeup, but she was only 27 or 8 years old. I suddenly thought of the tuft of black hair that had fallen out when I was combing my hair today. Oh, I was only 18. Suddenly, the woman raised her head and happened to meet my eyes. But it was only for a moment. She left the banquet without looking back. I turned around, still remembering the queen consort's instructions that she would be waiting for the emperor in the plum grove after the banquet, saying that her hometown stance would look best when the snow was falling and the winter roses were red. But unfortunately, I was the one who was left to guard the palace. The palace was warm. I rolled up my sleeves, revealing my fair arms, and slowly trimmed the winter rose that I had picked, leaving the main branch, cutting off the smaller branches. The flowers were blooming, and the originally lush cluster was left with only the cluster in the middle after trimming. I was very focused on doing this. So focused that I didn't notice when someone was behind me. By the time I smelled the strong scent of wine, I had already been pushed to the ground. The person on top of me was breathing rapidly. I couldn't push him away, and said anxiously, "Your Majesty, this servant is Fiona." The person paused. His dark eyes were bottomless. But they were clear enough. I thought he saw the cracks airing on my face, which was always calm. Fear and shame intertwined, and I repeated, "Your Majesty, Queen Consort is in the plum grove, you've mistaken this servant for someone else, this servant is Fiona." My voice was cut off, and the trimmed flower branches were scattered on the ground. The scent of wine was harmful, really harmful. Enough to easily sink one into depravity, and forget the chaotic process. In the darkness, I took the pruning shears and drew a line on my arm. The warm blood dripped on the bright yellow robe, and I quickly wrapped it with a cloth that I had prepared beforehand, thinking silently. This winter has been too long, but it will soon be over. Spring should be coming too. Smack! Bitch! I knew you had ulterior motives. I didn't expect you to be so bold as to be on my bed. I will definitely kill you. I will kill you now. As the candlelight and footsteps approached, the slap came immediately after. It stung on my face, carrying the earth-shattering anger of someone in power. I was wearing thin clothes, and knelt on the ground skillfully, with only one thought in my mind. So even the captivatingly beautiful queen consort, when filled with jealousy and resentment, had such an ugly, twisted face. But queen consort, you originally gained favor because of this face. How can this appearance make the person on the bed feel the old feelings? I didn't make a sound, and I didn't cry, just quietly letting her kick and hit me, as if admitting to all the crimes. The queen consort was completely enraged, screaming and stepping forward, her sharp fingernails ready to scratch my pale face. Enough. A hand stopped her actions. The most powerful person in this room and even the entire great dynasty finally stopped being silent, saying with some impatience and annoyance, "It was my intention, it has nothing to do with her. Queen consort, you are becoming more and more unruly." Clang! The jade vase on the table fell to the ground, and the fragments hit the back of my foot. I instinctively flinched. Suddenly feeling a sense of weightlessness, I gave a low cry, and was hugged in a broad embrace. The queen consort widened her eyes in disbelief. She should remember very clearly, because this day was the first time since she came to Great Dynasty that she had been reprimanded like this. By the emperor who had promised her one love for life. Bright tears filled her eyes, falling like broken pearls, but this time she didn't get any pity. Instead, the emperor left without looking back. Because she was too ugly. Horror, anger, arrogance, and jealousy were intertwined, gathered on one face. It was really too ugly. As soon as I left the palace door, the cold wind blew me inward. He laughed, and his chest vibrated with it. "You're even afraid of the cold. Why are you so stubborn and unwilling to beg for help when you're being beaten?" My head was still buried in his arms. Because I didn't want to see his face. My voice was also muffled. "That's the queen consort, this servant is the queen consort's servant." "No longer," he said without hesitation. On Christmas Eve, His Majesty carried a beautiful woman out of Queen Scarlet's palace. The next day, she was named a joy and resided in the Azure Cloud Palace. Such a promotion was as unreasonable as when Scarlet first came to Great Dynasty and was directly named Queen Scarlet. But it was equally sensational. It meant that after Queen Scarlet monopolized the emperor's favor for a whole year, someone finally broke the deadlock. The harem concubines also revived that night. The next day when I went to Queen's palace to pay my respects, it was crowded. Their eyes burned, but when they saw my face clearly, they looked disappointed. "What's so special? She's just a little pretty." Only the queen smiled at me and said, "You've worked hard, sister." I bowed respectfully, not overstepping my bounds. Her gaze deepened as she looked at me. From then on, in her free time, she often and invited me to sit with her in the palace, occasionally reciting poetry with me, always with a smile in her eyes. However, I didn't always have time. Peter Creed had been in my palace for almost 2 months. I didn't resist, but I didn't flaunt it either. Only occasionally did news of Queen Scarlet's illness reach me from outside the palace. He hesitated for a moment. I didn't hear him clearly and gave him a faint, puzzled smile. "What's wrong?" His eyes fixed on my face, and then he hugged me somewhat urgently. After 2 months of this, Queen Scarlet finally couldn't sit still. That day, I was still sitting in the palace waiting for Peter Creed to come. But instead, I received news that Peter Creed, on his way to my palace, had encountered Queen Scarlet kneeling and begging, and had changed his route. How can she do this? She's a queen. The maid beside me was furious. She was the one who hadn't delivered the message to Peter Creed in the plum grove that Christmas Eve. Her name was Vera. I reminded her, careful what you say. She bit her lip unwillingly. I found it amusing and comforted her. Isn't this a good thing? At least you can eat an extra bowl of rice and not feel so nauseous. She seemed convinced and swallowed. I added, for dinner tonight, add a plate of squirrel mandarin fish. Aren't you tired of it, madam? I said, but it's still my favorite. I haven't had it for 2 months, and I really miss it. However, we should add some side dishes. For Queen Scarlet, regaining favor was never difficult. She was spoiled, and Peter Creed, as the emperor, couldn't lower his head. So, as long as she figured this out and took the first step, Peter Creed would take the second and third steps for her. This was the honor given by the emperor, and it was also favoritism. Of course, Peter Creed also came to find me the next day, with a complex expression. I was sleepy, as usual, and smiled at him. Your Majesty has arrived. Seeing that I showed no his expression softened, and he suddenly thought of something and asked, Do you know where I went yesterday? I didn't understand why he asked this. Of course, I know. Your Majesty went to Queen Scarlet's place yesterday. What do you think? He asked again. I followed his lead. This is a good thing. Your Majesty has gained a beauty. Your concubine congratulates your Majesty. His face suddenly turned ugly. I went to find another woman, and you're so happy? I retorted, Isn't your Majesty happy? If he wasn't happy, how could he have stayed until dawn? He was indeed choked. He left without looking back. How strange. Queen Scarlet regained favor, but she could no longer monopolize it. Peter Creed seemed to have forgotten about me. He often stayed in Queen Scarlet's palace and occasionally went to other concubines, but he never went to the queen's. Because in his eyes, the queen was dull and boring. For a time, the harem seemed to have returned to the way it was before Queen Scarlet came. No one cared about the neglected queen, and a joy who had lost favor after gaining it. I just wonder how many pieces of official kiln porcelain in Queen Scarlet's palace are still intact. People, can't hold things in. If they do, something bad will happen. I counted the time and went to the queen's small gathering. She put squirrel mandarin fish on the table for me, and even pushed it closer to my hand. As I looked at it, I couldn't help but gag. The queen was frightened and surprised. How could this be? I didn't care much and waved my hand. Perhaps I'm just tired of it. She nodded and had someone take it away. The next day, I met Queen Scarlet in the imperial garden, surrounded by a crowd. She was still beautiful and moving, so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off her, but she had finally put down her airs and stood with those women who had shared the same intimate relationship with Peter Creed, smiling triumphantly. But only she knew how much unwillingness she had swallowed in that smile. So Queen Scarlet is here too. I'm not feeling well today. Joy, come back to the palace with me. The queen saw her and almost immediately pulled me away. Queen Scarlet looked down on her cowardly appearance, or rather, few people in the harem looked up to this timid queen. Naturally, they weren't afraid of her. The so-called respect was just lip service. Hearing this, she not only didn't restrain herself, but sneered again and again. Why are you standing there blankly? Go! Don't you think that you're a joy now, and I can't order you around? A foot washing maid is always a foot washing maid. I switched identities freely. I, your servant, obey. But in fact, I wasn't very good at swimming. What I had learned in the past was just playing in the river as a child. But someone could. I had watched him jump into the river countless times, his strong arms moving back and forth, diving into the water, and after a while, he would hold a lively fish and smile at me. Sue, I caught it! The spring water was cold, not much better than in winter. Recalling the past like this was really not beautiful. I felt a tingling all over my body, and the heavy palace clothes were also falling. When I grabbed the brocade handkerchief, I swam ashore. I was still pulled up by Vera and the maids beside the queen. When I came ashore, the pain in my abdomen was unbearable. I uncontrollably curled up on the ground, my face pale. This frightened those golden-leaved ladies. The queen mustered up her courage and shouted to call the imperial physician. Queen Scarlet's face was also not good-looking, but she was unwilling to show it and wouldn't admit her mistake. She gritted her teeth. What's the rush? She's been in this pond in winter before, and nothing happened. Now she's just pretending. I didn't expect you to be so scheming, wanting to frame me. Let me tell you, don't even think about it. Get up for me. As she spoke, she rose at her foot and kicked me. The tips of the concubine's shoes were upturned, inlaid with pearls, and it hurt especially when they kicked my stomach. It hurt so much that I couldn't tell whether it was the pain of flesh or the pain of separation of flesh and blood. Blood, bleeding. Someone shouted in horror, pointing at the blood flowing between my legs, beside themselves with fear. Medicine smell, a very bitter medicine smell. When I regained consciousness, I only heard the man's roar beside me. Why is this happening? Wasn't there supposed to be an imperial physician examining you every few days? Why hasn't anyone noticed all this time? The old man speaking trembled. Joy's fetus is less than 2 months old, and Joy is weak. The pulse is weak, your humble servant. Useless. A bunch of useless people. Is this how I let you serve people? My child! Since he ascended the throne, there had been only 2 princesses. The eldest prince, born after him, died after only half a year. Then he favored Queen Scarlet alone, and others had no chance. Although he didn't say it, he wasn't completely indifferent to having so few children. Before he could finish speaking, someone reported, "The Queen Mother has arrived." Everything went silent. Peter Creed said, "All of you, step back." Through a screen, the old voice fell into my ears. "Emperor, you are really too indulgent of Queen Scarlet." Peter Creed didn't speak. He and the Queen Mother were not really mother and son. The Queen Mother didn't care either. "My son is the Emperor, whatever you do is right. Even if you wave your hand and mark out a city to exchange for beauty, people below will praise the Emperor's magnificent spirit, truly a beautiful tale. But just a foreign land woman, since you want to favor her, that is also a favor to her. I have nothing to say. But the country and its people, the foundation of the nation cannot be shaken. There are few imperial heirs in the harem, the queen has no children. And the concubines below do not respect her, becoming bolder and bolder. Now they can openly harm imperial heirs. Is this what you want?" Peter Creed's voice was tired. "Queen Mother, you know that I don't have that kind of feeling for Mia. What a joke. Are you only doing things based on your likes and dislikes now? You just don't like her personality, but she is still a good child. If it weren't for her today, do you think you would be alive?" The Queen Mother came and went in a hurry, leaving behind an emperor full of anger. He said sternly, "Someone. Your servant is here." Those concubines who watched and humiliated Joy today are not allowed to leave the royal palace for 5 years. All the palace people below who watched Joy suffer, one by one, take them to the office of prudence. And those useless and negligent imperial physicians, all of them, have their heads chopped off. Not being allowed to leave the royal palace for 5 years was tantamount to being sent to the coal palace, but there were countless beauties in the palace, so it didn't seem to matter if a few were missing. But people would die if they lost their heads. Peter Creed knew this, but he didn't care. If he wanted to favor someone, he would bestow imperial grace without any scruples, just like the way he handled Queen Scarlet falling into the water. Today, I also received this honor. Countless blood, poured into beauty, moved into poetry and opera, would be an eternal love story, lingering and touching. I'm just afraid that I'll have a bad name in future history. I sighed and finally opened my eyes, Your Majesty. Peter Creed paused, turned around, and looked at me with guilt. Fiona, it's okay, it's okay. We will have children, I will vent your anger. My voice was weak. Your concubine knows everything. It's not anyone's fault. It's just that your concubine is weak and doesn't have the blessing. Don't talk nonsense. He walked forward, and seeing that I wasn't devastated, his expression improved. If you can feel better and be soft-hearted and let those people go, I will agree to you, but you can't talk nonsense. I smiled and nodded, okay. A smile also appeared on his lips. He suddenly thought of something and said, "What are you holding in your hand? The people below can't pry it open." I realized it belatedly and let go in front of him. Then I watched his face turn white little by little. It was a brocade handkerchief embroidered with a pair of lifelike mandarin ducks. I suddenly realized, this is what Queen Scarlet ordered me to find in the water. It must be very important. His voice trembled. "Do you know what this is?" I shattered his last bit of luck. "I know. Queen Scarlet said that this is the love token between your majesty and Queen Scarlet." I smiled and put it into Peter Creed's hand, whispering, "Your Majesty, it's back where it belongs now." Peter Creed, Peter Creed, it's just like what you thought, because the love token you gave to Scarlet, it buried one of your children. He stood up abruptly, his eyes bloodshot. "Fiona Choi. You know why you still have this expression. Why aren't you angry? Why are you still smiling? Or do you not care at all? You don't care about the child, you don't care about me. What do you care about? It was like this before, and it's like this now. When I'm with other concubines, even the queen will feel resentment, only you smile and congratulate me on gaining a beauty." He stared at me almost resentfully. "In your eyes, is there no me at all?" TSK, he's really good at reading people. At night, Vera put out the candles and lovingly covered me with a quilt. In the silence, a faint sob made the person in the darkness panic. He lifted the quilt and looked at me curled up inside, crying uncontrollably. I also looked at him, with tears streaming down my face. Some kind of estrangement disappeared silently. He hugged me tightly, joy and awe intertwined. "It's okay, it's okay." I cried and asked him, "Why is it me? Why is it still me? I've already listened to her. Why can't I even keep my child? Am I not obedient enough? Am I not generous enough?" "No, it's not your fault. You should be like this now. This is the real you," he replied. I cried like this and fell asleep without knowing when, and was still being held tightly when I woke up the next day. The emperor left, leaving behind a sentence. "I will definitely avenge you." That day, the news that I was made a queen and that Queen Scarlet became a joy with the crime of great disrespect, and was confined for 2 years, spread at the same time. Yes, just 2 years, nothing more. Why wasn't she charged with harming the imperial heir? Because of the victory at the borderlands. It's a pity that it wasn't Great Dynasty's borderlands, but the borderlands of Queen Scarlet's home country, Thousand Moon Kingdom. The suddenly rising neighboring country was aggressive. That city that was cut off made it easy to attack and difficult to defend, catching Great Dynasty off guard. Countless soldiers were buried in foreign land, and countless Great Dynasty men joined the army again with determination. I heard that a young general had emerged in this batch. Of course, I just heard about it. After all, trapped within these red walls, news was always slow to reach me. Peter Creed was occasionally angry. He felt that the defeat was due to the incompetence of the soldiers. Why would they still lose after the national treasury allocated so much military pay? If they really had the strength, how could they retreat step by step because of a city? Coincidentally, at this time, Queen Scarlet, now she should be called Ning, Joy. The poems and songs that Joy had someone send were seen, causing the emperor to become angry again, punishing a bunch of helping palace people, and issuing a death order, forbidding anyone from mentioning her name again. Fortunately, this year was not peaceful. There was also good news. The queen was pregnant, and she successfully gave birth to a dragon son. This was the emperor's eldest son, the future heir. Even if Peter Creed was still indifferent to the queen, his eyebrows were full of smiles. He pardoned the world. What a sight. I was also happy. I looked at the tender white baby and smiled. That's great. The queen had indirectly asked me why I had no children even though my relationship with the emperor was so deep. I smiled and said, "I hurt my foundation when I miscarried that year. I'm afraid I won't have any more children in the future." The hand holding the teacup trembled, and her face turned pale. She became even better to me. Whenever she had something that didn't overstep her bounds, she would always leave an extra portion for me. Even the cloth for the child's clothes was chosen together with me. I watched the prince grow up little by little, learning to call father emperor, mother queen, and finally calling me softly, queen. How lovely! Such a pleasing child, with a woman from a noble family like the queen as his mother, and a highly respected scholar as his tutor, first teaching him etiquette, integrity, and honor, and then teaching him the strategy of governing the country. As for me, I was just holding him, reading to him word by word. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize it. If the ruler uses this to think of danger, then danger will not come. There were also interludes in this. Ning, Joy, who had been confined for 2 years, came out. At that time, I was sitting beside Peter Creed, serving him snow pear soup that had been stewed for a long time. There was no way. He had been coughing these days, and it wouldn't hurt to drink more. The person who came in was dressed in plain clothes, kneeling on the ground. The 2 years of neglect had caused a huge change in her temperament. The spoiled nature was gone, leaving only vulnerability. The exquisite bow tie was without makeup, but it had a unique charm. Peter Creed stared at her at a glance. If your majesty still resents this concubine will kneel again, but what happened in the beginning was just an unintentional mistake, not intentional. As she spoke, her face was wet with tears. But, after all, it's this concubine's fault. Peter Creed seemed to show intolerance, but he hadn't forgotten the dead child. I had already stood up and helped her up. Joy, it's all over. She was surprised. This concubine is just a joy. In my eyes, you will always be a queen. She didn't speak, as if she was moved. If I hadn't been too close, I would have seen the resentment flashing in her eyes. Peter Creed was naturally happy with such a harmonious scene. After all, the war between Thousand Moon Kingdom and Great Dynasty had now been quelled by that young general, and a treaty had been signed. At this time, making Ning, Joy look bad would be somewhat disrespectful. As soon as you say Chow Chow, Chow Chow arrives, the eunuch announced, Your Majesty, Shan General has arrived. Peter Creed asked Ning, Joy to leave first, but he didn't ask me to avoid him. He smiled and said, Since he's here, let him in. The person who walked in when the door opened brought the cold wind from outside. Because he was too anxious, he was still wearing armor, and it made a heavy sound when he walked. I was a little dazed. I thought to myself that being a general was so glorious. Your humble servant greets your majesty. Shan General's voice was young. Peter Creed joked with him, and he was able to respond freely, without the arrogance and immaturity of a young general. It was just that as they chatted, they still had to talk about serious matters. This time, they talked about military pay. This winter is colder than in previous years. If we follow the usual division, I'm afraid the soldiers in the borderlands won't be able to hold on. Then how much more do you want? Do why? Oh, you want silver again? There's only so much silver in the national treasury. Cough, cough, cough. It was possible in previous years, but it's not possible this year. Peter Creed coughed violently, and I hurriedly handed him snow pear soup. He said irritably, On such a good day, you have to talk about this, it's really disappointing. Sean Lee didn't say anything, but he didn't leave either. He stood there stiffly, which made Peter Creed laugh angrily. You're forcing me. Your temper is just like your father's. As he said this, he ignored Sean Lee and said to me, Why do you smell of medicine today? I heard that you've also set up a Buddhist hall. Are you sick? I smiled bitterly, an old illness. I'm just setting up a Buddhist hall to pray for blessings. His smile froze slightly. My old illness had always been just one. A belly that had been barren for a long time after a miscarriage. No matter how many bowls of medicine I drank, it still wouldn't have any effect. Perhaps I was touched by the scene, and my words were somewhat out of line. It's so cold, I wonder if that child, who went to another family, will be cold. Thinking of the scene where I had just held Ning, Joy's hand and forgiven her, Peter Creed was restless. In the end, Shanli got the life-saving silver he wanted but couldn't get, but he got it because the high and mighty emperor pitied the person beside him and sighed, just take it as praying for blessings. When he left the royal palace, I was called by Shanli. I said frankly and respectfully, Your humble servant thanks you, madam, on behalf of the soldiers in the borderlands. I didn't appreciate it and said to him in front of the eunuch, "It was your majesty who gave the silver. You should thank your majesty. What's more, this is just to pray for blessings for my child who never saw the light of day." He paused and bent his waist even lower. "Your humble servant will never forget your majesty's kindness, and your humble servant will also remember your majesty's words." The eunuch had already entered the palace. My voice was lower. "If you really want to thank me, then win more battles, treat the people below better, like your father. By the way, say hello to your mother for me." I only turned around when he left and saw that Ning, Joy hadn't moved in the distance, standing there, not knowing how long she had been watching. I smiled at her calmly. This treaty was signed for 3 years. During these 3 years, Ning, Joy regained favor, but didn't get any more power. On the other hand, the queen was getting older and steadily sat in the center of the harem. The envoys are coming, and she's becoming more and more tyrannical. The queen complained to me and worriedly said, "She's too quiet, I always feel like there's something waiting behind." I comforted her not to worry. Even if there was something waiting behind, it should be me who was waiting. Her face became even more worried, and she stared at me deeply. "I'm afraid it's really you." A woman's intuition is always very accurate. It's already beyond my expectation that she's only becoming suspicious now. But I only felt happy. Because after so many years, what should come has finally come. Scarlet kicked me to my knees crazily, laughing maniacally. "Ha ha ha ha, Peter Creed, you can't do anything either. Fiona Choi, should I call you Fiona Choi, or Celeste Sue?" The name I hadn't heard for many years made my heart tremble, but the envoys of Thousand Moon Kingdom weren't in the mood to watch her go crazy. They looked down at me and said, "Joy, we already know about your matter. Your husband, Ku Heng, was killed by the Great Dynasty's emperor. He defended the city gate, but it was also handed over by your Great Dynasty emperor. You hate him, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And when I came, I heard that the Great Dynasty Emperor's health has been getting worse and worse these years." I said woodenly, "What do you want to do?" The envoy asked in return, "How can such careful torment relieve your hatred? Shouldn't you make him childless and heirless?" I raised my eyes and looked at Scarlet beside me. "Are you willing? Don't you love him deeply?" "Shut up." Scarlet's face twisted. "Don't mention him to me. Liar! They're all liars. What is one life, one love, one couple? Even if he used the city as an exchange, he still ended up lying in another woman's arms? He told me that he was the emperor and that it was supposed to be like this. Ha 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 ha, how ridiculous. There's nothing more poisonous than a broken heart. I used to love him, but what about him? For a foot washing maid's child, he sent me to confinement for 2 years. 2 years! Those rough meals and clothes almost drove me crazy. I want to kill him. I want him to die." Her hatred was too strong. Because her love was also too strong. But it's all the same, as long as there's hatred, that's enough. I replied to her, "As you wish." I didn't entangle with her too much and quietly left with the poison. Because I was very busy, there was still someone waiting for me. Just like now. I looked at the queen, standing in front of the azure cloud palace, with a heavy expression. She spoke first. "The queen mother wants to see you." I nodded. Everyone withdrew, and I walked into the hall. The woman with a full head of white hair, her face etched with wrinkles, silently sized me up. "Celeste Sue." "Your Majesty," I replied. "I thought you were one to keep the peace, but I didn't expect this." "So, you knew all along that I arranged the miscarriage back then?" I chuckled softly. "Queen Mother, your move was truly a stroke of genius. It struck a blow against the arrogant Queen Scarlet, eliminated a foot washing maid's unwanted child, and allowed the queen to give birth to the firstborn son. Wasn't that ingenious? The queen probably only realized it after the fact, acting on orders. But you didn't retaliate against the nor did you retaliate against me. Because I never wanted that child to begin with," I said with a smile. "How could such a monstrous seed deserve to be born?" The queen mother fell silent, then said, word by careful word, when I was teaching this son of mine, he was already 14 and had been led astray by his father, consumed by beauty and heedless of everything else. The lives of the 20,000 soldiers in Sui City, I owe them, and the emperor bears that debt as well. But Celeste Su, is the person you see today the result you wanted? I don't want to kill you, but don't cross that line. Now there was a firstborn grandson. The queen mother had also become more lenient. Of course, if Peter Creed hadn't been secretly undermining the queen mother's family recently, she might not have been so lenient. I knelt deeply before her, speaking resolutely. Su's husband died for the country, and Su is also a person of the great dynasty. Su will never betray the country. Sighs echoed through the hall. I didn't know how long I knelt before Vera, eyes red, helped me up. But I laughed. Why are you crying? It's all coming to an end, isn't it? That night, I stood outside the palace gates to personally welcome Peter Creed's arrival, and I was even more proactive with him, so much so that he was still holding me and calling my name before he fell asleep. He called, Fiona, Fiona. But my name is Celeste Su. The next day, a layer of gloom shrouded the royal palace. I watched the winter roses outside, almost all of their petals gone, and trimmed the last remaining branch, breaking even the main stem in half this time. Urgent, chaotic footsteps burst through the door, and Vera screamed. Countless imperial guards surrounded the place, sealing it off. Queen Scarlet, radiant and beautiful in her gorgeous palace attire, pointed at me with disgust. It's you! You vicious woman! You actually poisoned His Majesty. Now His Majesty is spitting blood and has fainted. Yo! You are undeniably guilty and deserve to die. But if it was just you alone, you certainly couldn't have done such a thing. Who is backing you? Tell me quickly, and maybe you'll get to keep your whole corpse. I sat still, smiling faintly as I retorted, who does your Majesty want me to say it is? Her Majesty the Queen? Or perhaps the young prince? Her expression froze. She hadn't expected me to so bluntly expose her intentions. She said viciously, just wait, once you're in the office of prudence, or even the dungeon, they have plenty of ways to make you talk. Search the place! At her command, the surrounding eunuchs and maids began smashing the objects in the hall. She was finally triumphant, because she was the winner. And behind her, the emperor, who had woken up and arrived unnoticed, was staring at me coldly. Your Majesty. Queen Scarlet was startled. But Peter Creed ignored her. Step by step, he walked towards me. Weakened by his illness, his steps were unsteady. He lowered his head and asked me, Celeste Su? I replied respectfully, Your Majesty. What is your relationship with Ku Hung? His voice was suppressed with murderous intent. I still spoke the truth, with a hint of nostalgia in my eyes. Your Majesty, he was my husband who died for the country. Ah! My voice stopped abruptly because he was strangling my neck. The once arrogant emperor, now with bloodshot eyes, asked me, so you're going to attack me? Haven't I been good enough to you? Gold and jewels, anything you asked for, I gave it to you. And what about you? You actually deceived me. And even for a lowly soldier, you meticulously plotted to kill me. He almost roared, Celeste Su. Do you even have a heart? The feeling of suffocation caused tears to stream down my face uncontrollably. He wanted to strangle me to death, but I didn't resist. I almost thought I would die today, but I knew I wouldn't. The searchers trembled. Your Majesty, there's nothing. Peter Creed paused, his hand suddenly releasing its grip. How could there be nothing? It's her. Did you search carefully? Queen Scarlet shouted in disbelief. The palace servant didn't dare to deceive the emperor. There really is nothing. Peter Creed looked at me in confusion. I cried and laughed at him. What is your Majesty looking at? Are you looking at me, a woman who has fallen in love with her enemy? Who has given her heart away? Kill me, I said to him. Kill me now. I have no face to meet Ku again. I was suddenly embraced tightly. Peter Creed gnashed his teeth fiercely. Don't even think about it. How many layers of security were there for the emperor's food? From the selection of ingredients to the preparation, every step was carefully watched, and even when it reached his lips, someone would taste it first to confirm that it was safe before he could eat it. This rule didn't diminish even when the concubines ate in their palaces. Not to mention the clothes he wore, the brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones he used. There were no fewer people watching these than there were watching the food. To try to poison him was simply harder than ascending to heaven. Queen Scarlet naturally knew this, otherwise, she wouldn't have pushed me to do it. She was gambling, passing her troubles on to me. If I succeeded, she could bring down the queen along with me. If I failed and was caught on the spot, she didn't seem to lose anything either. It was a pity for her pig brain to actually believe that I could do it. How laughable. If it were really that easy, why would I have endured for so many years? But if you didn't poison him, why is he still sick, so seriously sick? Queen Scarlet was still confused before she died. There was no other way. Spitting blood was a fact, and being seriously ill was also a fact. Since I hadn't poisoned him and no poison could be found, then the poison must naturally be with Queen Scarlet. Poisoning the Emperor was a crime punishable by death. But she hadn't poisoned him either. I stroked her beautiful face and said quietly, "Your Majesty is from the Thousand Moon Kingdom. How could you not know that the Thousand Moon Kingdom also has a poison called Tomb of Beauty?" "You mean that lost aphrodisiac?" Queen Scarlet suddenly understood, then laughed. "So that's it. So that's it. I was wondering why Peter Creed didn't love so many beauties, but only favored your plain face. So it was you who took that short-lived aphrodisiac." As she said this, she stopped abruptly, staring at me. Those who take that aphrodisiac not only have a short life but can never get pregnant. You're a child back then, you were. I nodded. That was originally waiting for you to miscarry. Bitch. Celeste Sue. You bitch. Tomb of Beauty is not poisonous. How can you kill Peter Creed? Tomb of Beauty, fragrance that penetrates the bones. 1 grain of non-toxic medicine, taken for many years, only then does it accumulate into that little bit of toxicity, and that little bit is enough to take a person's life. Everything around Peter Creed was not poisonous. The poison was me. Every time he was intimate with me, the toxicity deepened. Just as Joy had said, I would die a horrible death. But I also wanted to drag the damned with me. The culprit who killed those 20,000 soldiers was never a beauty who could topple empires, but the fatuous ruler who ceded cities with a wave of his hand. I personally took the white silk that Vera handed over and placed it around Queen Scarlet's slender neck. She panicked completely. "No, you can't kill me. My motherland has just signed a treaty with the Great Dynasty. If you kill me, how will you explain it to my motherland?" I sneered. "Treaty? Are you referring to that piece of waste paper? Joy, Shan General's Iron Cavalry must already be under your Thousand Moon City, right?" She trembled with fear. I simply told her another secret. "You've been in the palace for many years, but you haven't had a child. Why do you think that is?" Her eyes widened. "Pet." This time she really thought too much. Peter Creed loved beauty, but he also looked down on women. He didn't think that a child born to a foreign woman would pose any threat to him, especially since that woman was one he had deeply loved. "It's me." I tightened the white silk, watching coldly as her bones contorted. "Your Majesty, does the foot-washing water soaked in safflower still feel comfortable?" After this incident, Peter Creed became even more dependent on me. His illness became more and more serious. And extremely painful. The imperial physician said that the poison found on Queen Scarlet was extremely potent, so these symptoms were normal. They just needed to recuperate first. If it could be cured, why would they use the word recuperate? Every time Peter Creed screamed in pain, his temper became more volatile, and he had no heart for state affairs. In the end, the Queen Mother simply took the young prince to oversee the country. She didn't come to see me again. The Queen did come, she came to see me. "He's in pain, and you'll only be in more pain. Is it worth it?" She had had a young infatuation with Peter Creed, as well as countless resentments. In the end, it had turned into indifference. In her eyes, she only needed to fulfill the duties of a mother of the nation. So-called favor was just fleeting cloud. I laughed. With my great revenge achieved, how could I be in pain? I'm happy. I've never been so happy. Peter Creed died in great pain. He grabbed my hand and asked me why. More or less, as time went on, he looked at the bloody scratches on my arm, as painful as his own, and understood everything. Where have I not been good enough to you? Even a lowly commoner soldier made you go to such lengths. He was a high and mighty emperor, and receiving a little bit of his holy grace should have been cause for gratitude, not to mention that he was just an insignificant soldier. How could he compare to him? Commoner? Soldier? I laughed mockingly. Yes, your majesty trades cities for beauties, full of heroism. How would you remember what those commoner soldiers paid to defend every inch of land? Naturally, they also don't know that the cities they swore to defend with their lives became someone else's territory with a wave of your majesty's hand. 20,000 people died in that battle. 20,000 people were no match for the smile of a beauty. From generals and officers to the smallest cook, they were buried in the snow. The winter in the borderlands is cold, so cold that they were all frozen together. When it melted, it was impossible to tell whose hand was whose foot. So much so that I searched through mountains of corpses and seas of blood and couldn't find a handful of my husband's bones. Only the young widow and children, and the aged elders, they cried, and I cried too, but when I cried, I wondered, why should we cry while you laugh? So I came to your side and Queen Scarlet's side. I laughed freely. Sure enough, hearing you cry makes me feel much better. His eyes glared, but he couldn't say a word. In the end, I only heard myself say, Peter Creed, you can't compare to those commoner soldiers, because you're not worthy. That night, the palace was filled with mourning. The sound of weeping rose and fell. The prince, who already knew things, ascended the throne the next day with the support of the Shan family. Spring arrived, and the gates of Azure Cloud Palace, which had been closed for a long time, couldn't let the blossoming peach blossoms fly out, and no one remembered that there was still a consort Rong. It was also before my death that I saw Mrs. Li again. Her half-white hair was now completely white. Shan Li looked 3 parts like her and 7 parts like Shan General. I had seen Ku Heng from afar when I sent him to join the army. Her tone was steady. You did it. When you asked me for Tomb of Beauty back then, I didn't think you'd live to see the second day in the palace. I was as thin as a withered tree, and I was losing my hair. I smiled helplessly and pointed to Vera, who was crying beside me. Take her away. When she went to find her brother's bones, she was still fighting me for them. A little stupid, even to the point of not being able to distinguish her brother's bones from another person's husband's bones, but the virtue lies in being obedient and not causing trouble. Don't dislike her. Mrs. Li nodded. I know. As she left, the queen arrived with the prince. The prince was now sensible, with the bearing of an emperor, but he still called me as before, Your Majesty. The queen called me Fiona. I was already a little dazed, shaking my head. No, my name isn't Fiona, my name is Sue. My name is Celeste Sue. From the Shan family of Arcadia Octagon Alley. My husband's surname is Ku. We were childhood sweethearts and knew each other since we were young. He said he wanted to be a great general. The more I spoke, the more confused I became, finding that I couldn't say many things I wanted to say, only the one I wanted to say, Your Majesty, I miss home so much.